All right, good evening, everyone. It's July 30th, 2025, and this is a public meeting of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, full committee meeting. And I will now pass it over to our chairs, Odelia and Devante, to get us started.
Hi, everybody. My name is Odelia Zuckerman. Use she, her pronouns, and I'll pass it to Devante.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. Devontae Manyweather, one of the co-chairs for the full committee of PCCEP, and I'll pass it to Tia. I think I saw Tia.
I'm unmuting. My name is Tia Palafox, and I'm the co-chair with Kip on the Policy and Reform Subcommittee. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you so much. And looking through to see if oh, yes, Kip, would you like to go next? I see you here. Oh, Kip, you're still on mute.
While we're waiting for Kip, let's pass it to Conrad.
Thanks.
Thanks. I'm Conrad Hewlin, he, him pronouns. I'm on the Policy and Reform Subcommittee, and we'll send it over to Jorge.
Hi everyone, Jorge Sanchez Bautista, PCCEP member and a member of the Settlement Policy Subcommittee. I will pass it to Viva.
Hi, Viva Campo, she, her pronouns, and I'm a member of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. And I will pass it to, I believe I saw Carrie here. Is that correct?
Yes, hi. I'm Carrie Driver. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a PCCEP member. Sorry to be off camera tonight. I have a terrible head cold. Let's see, is Kip's microphone working yet? I don't see anyone else. But let me know if I missed someone.
I'm here.
Noelle.
Hi, Noelle.
Hi, this is Noelle Cuthair. I'm a PCCEP member, also currently the subcommittee, co-chair of the subcommittee for community engagement. Thank you. And also, I'm not sure who else is here yet. Kip might be here now.
He's in the chat, he's saying that his audio is not working.
And we have another member here, Gabby, is with us.
Hi guys, I'm Gabby. I am going to keep my camera off right now. I use she, her pronouns, and thanks.
Okay, so I think we'll just Kip, chime in whenever you can, but we can move on for the time being. Chairs.
Yeah, so folks from the city and the Independent Monitor want to introduce themselves. That would be great.
Greetings all, Antoinette Edwards, Associate Monitor. And I'm eating, so I'm off camera, so I can't share with everybody, so.
Hi folks, Elizabeth Perez, Enterprise Services Director for the Public Safety Service Area.
Hi folks, Stephanie Howard, she, her pronouns, Director of Community Safety for the Public Safety Service Area.
Good evening, folks. Mary Claire Buckley, Portland Police Bureau.
I'm Dory Grabinski, PCCEP Program Manager.
Hi, I'm Sarah Ames with the City Attorney's Office.
Good evening. I'm Todd DeWeese, Assistant Operations Manager with BOEC. I will be gone for about 30 minutes here shortly, but I'll be back.
Hello, everyone. Afrida Davis, pronoun she, her, facilitator.
Okay. Is that everyone? Sweet. So community members, if you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, that would be great. And Devontae, do you want to read these or do you want me to read these?
Sure, I can read them. So we have our community agreements here. Listen actively and respectfully, share airtime, be present and open to new information and perspectives, assume positive intent, respect each other, respect the group, speak your own truth, communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully, ask questions to clarify, call out bias, and be okay with ambiguity. So just a little overview of today's meeting. We'll have updates here, just a couple seconds or minutes. We'll have a report on subcommittees at 6:45 approximately, a final review and vote on recommendation on the monitoring gap at 7:05, and then we'll end with open public comments. All right, so I guess the biggest update we have here is that we do have a new PCEP member appointed, Gabby, who introduced herself. She was appointed earlier this month, so we are very happy to have her in the meeting tonight.
Yeah, welcome, Gabby. We'll have more opportunities later for all of our members to get to know each other better. And we're still in the process of onboarding Gabby, so I don't want to put her on the spot, but we're very glad to have her on board.
Also, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I didn't know there's going to be a whole slide for me today. I do feel a little because I haven't been onboarded, I kind of just want to hang back until that process is done, if you don't mind.
Of course.
I
Yep.
appreciate the warm welcome. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, we can move on.
So last week we did have a listening session on the death of Damon Lamar Johnson, where community kind of came together and everyone was able to kind of share their thoughts and their feelings, their varying perspectives on Damon Lamar Johnson's passing, and the details and factors surrounding his death. So we were able to hear just community testimony. There were even a couple of different individuals who were associated with um, helping to facilitate different services that kind of had some personal interactions with Mr. Johnson. So that was insightful to hear those perspectives and those people speak on some of the challenges that they kind of witness in dealing with individuals who may be struggling with mental health crises, and those interactions, uh, with law enforcement that might occur with those individuals. And then go ahead and pass this to Odelia.
Yeah. So as some of you may know, yesterday there was a fairness hearing for the settlement agreement. So PCEP, as always, gave a statement, and this is part of our statement. And I think I'm going to read it because it's important. So this last week, PCEP held a listening session on the death of Damon Lamar Johnson with over 140 attendees. One of the most striking things that emerged from the session was the large number of social workers and resident service providers who attended the event, including Mr. Johnson's assigned caseworker. Every single one of them testified that they do not feel safe calling police when there is a resident conflict, especially involving a mental health incident. They also emphasized that mental health crises happen every single day they are on the job. From this event, it was clear that many communities in Portland still feel significant distrust in the PPB, stemming from tragedies such as this recent death to a perceived lack of real accountability. People also expressed the need for bolstered alternative response systems like PSR, but questioned if this broadly supported outcome is attainable given the power and influence of the Portland Police Association when it comes to determining call allocation. So I think this is like a very good summary of what we heard, and then obviously we heard a lot more. And I think, at least for me personally, it's got me thinking about what kind of PCEP can do next. But I was just wondering if any other members want to share your thoughts, how you felt about the event, anything at all.
I can.
Oh, you can go, Tia.
I was just writing in the chat about, I didn't realize, and I learned how people with lived experiences came up to share, and that was really brave for a few people who were really passionate and emotional going up and sharing their stories. But how hard it is to get a public defender and how crucial that is. And I was thinking maybe at some point the Policy and Reform Subcommittee could look into that.
Yeah. Carrie?
I just thought the listening session was a great example of us, of PCEP being a platform where many people with a lot of important things can come and share. And we heard mainly, one perspective, but it was a very informative perspective. And I just thought that the event was well done and raised a lot of interesting points and perspectives.
Yeah. Thank you. Kip?
No?
Yeah.
Oh, you can. Okay, cool. Yay, got it working. I am an IT professional. Um, what was what was striking to me is how many people from the mental health worker community had shown up to speak to their experiences and echoing what we heard from the PSR town hall, almost 2 years ago, or not, I don't even recall the time frame now. But the over and over again, we kept hearing that this never should have happened. We need alternative systems to address this. And it speaks to the heart of why we're all here right now and have volunteered for this role. And all you folks who are on the call have shown up. So I just feel like it is, if it's not also with the status hearing meeting yesterday, if it's not loud and clear to our elected leaders and our public safety leadership that we need something drastically different because we're not seeing the results that we expected after years and years of knowing that we have issues, it shouldn't take another person's passing for it to be even clearer, but it's unequivocal. So it's a call to action. A year ago? Thanks, Dory. Was it? Okay, anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. Jorge, I saw your hand, but you put it back? No? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I guess also I'm wondering if this prompted any like ideas. I know we heard a lot about PSR for like potential next steps and how we can continue the conversation or recommendation ideas or anything like that. Do folks have any thoughts? I do. Devontae? Oh, Carrie?
I just, it's not related to PSR, but the few people brought up the idea of community education as being really helpful to prevent escalation. And I just thought that was a really interesting idea, like educating neighbors and communities for how to respond. And then they call different people instead of 911. And I thought that was an an interesting approach.
Yeah, Viva just put it in the chat, mental health first aid. I've taken that training. It's definitely very useful for helping. Devontae, were you gonna say something too?
Um, well, yeah, I thought that it was a very insightful event. I felt like I got some very interesting perspective. Um, and there were some comments that were made by people who attended that really kind of spoke to the systemic issues that we're currently seeing and the gaps of adequate assistance for people who are experiencing mental health crisis. And what Carrie mentioned about the education piece being something that kind of resonated with me. I definitely second that. Law enforcement is going to continue to show up if community is not calling maybe the best suited resource, and so but maybe community isn't aware of what that resource is or how to contact that resource, and so maybe holding some events to kind of get that information out there and really just promote the existence of PSR and other groups in that vein. Um, Johnson's case manager did state that there was a pattern of law enforcement responding to calls at Damon's property. So, I think that also kind of just highlights exactly what I just said, that, people aren't necessarily calling the appropriate resource. So how can we, insert ourselves into that, promotion piece and education piece? I think that would be huge. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can always do more of that, like education sharing and stuff. I also think like something that's been sitting with me a lot is, and I shared it at our meeting, but I was really frustrated with the rollout of the body-worn camera footage and PPB's summary video that was narrated. And for me, that feels kind of like a tangible thing that we can make a recommendation or like think about um in terms of like what editing should look like. I think for me, it was very narrated and told a certain story, and then when I watched the raw footage, I had a completely different understanding of the event. Like they were saying like, oh, officers were building rapport, officers were having him calm down, and different things like that, and then they didn't actually show the force that was used, and I didn't understand how he died. And so I think like that's the one tangible idea that came to mind too, is like I think we need to know like the time between like when AMR got there and when they were called. Like those were things I would want to know from a summary video instead of having to like figure it out for myself, if that makes sense. I don't know what other people think about that idea.
That's just a clarifying question. Are you referring to the 5 minute video or
Yeah.
the 16-minute video?
No, the 5 minute one.
Okay.
What's the 16-minute one? The raw footage?
Are you referring to the event that we attended?
Yeah, but specifically the video, the first video they showed us, the summary one.
I can see
Devontae,
that.
I'll jump
Right.
in. So what they showed at the private screenings was they showed the summary video and then they added a little bit more of the raw footage. But the first thing was the summary video. But I got confused too. I don't know if you were on the same wavelength as me.
Well, no, I figured that she was that Odelia was referring to the 5 minute video, but I guess I would understand that more, or I would maybe share that same perspective had we not also seen the 16-minute video after the 5 minute video. So, you know,
I guess we can hear from Barb if folks would like to. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, of course. You can't hear. Can you hear the background noise?
It's okay.
Well, it's because I clicked on the video when you guys were calling on me. So sorry. Distracted by the chat. There's a couple of questions that I still have about the event that I don't know if they're going to come out in the grand jury testimony or where they sit, because I have concerns on the county side with, the behavioral health treatment, but also that's who's in charge of the ambulances. And I know enough to wonder, but don't know the answer, which type of ambulance was actually sent to the call and whether they dispatch ALS, which is what BLS is basic life saving and ALS is advanced life saving. So, like, I don't know if they usually do one or the other specifically for mental health calls, but I kind of somehow logically am wondering if, because of the way the call escalated, did they have the right people there to try to save the guy, which is important only because I think all areas need to be looked at. And that would, be something really important that I did not hear the cops call to upgrade an ambulance at all, or even to do anything other than, tell it to stop staging and come on in. That's one comment. And my other comment, and I'm going to try to look for this truth in advertising. I'm on the BHUAC, the Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Council. But I am always super curious with these events. Who is the ECIT? I'm not sure which of those officers was the ECIT officer. And I would like to be able to, in that committee especially, thank you, Adelia. That's as good as having Jared around. You're supposed to giggle. Yeah, want to know how they're acting and be able to, suss that out. Whether he was called there. Do you know if he was called there as ECIT? And then I'll shut up.
So I heard this was at the private meeting that it was an ECIT call. I don't know if anyone from PPB can clarify that because I've heard a few different things.
When the Boet guy comes back, I will ask him in the chat. Because I was excited he was here, but then he was gone. And I will stop taking up your time. Thank you guys very much for what you're doing.
The guy is still here. I haven't left yet. I'm actually trying to find the incident, see if I can get a couple of those questions answered. So if you can give me just a couple of minutes.
Oh, absolutely, Todd. Thank you. And
thank you.
Melanie will tell you I'm a pain in the butt sometimes, but I ask questions.
So is she.
Thank you. Yeah, I think those are really important questions and things to consider, Barb. So thanks for bringing that up. And also to clarify, I wasn't saying they shouldn't release the raw footage. I just took issue with like that 5-minute summary video because I think that's how most people are going to perceive and understand the news. They're not going to watch 60, 70 minutes of raw footage, right? And so if that's the story that's being told, it definitely affects how the public understands what happened. And so that's why I think this is like very important. Debbie, did you have thoughts?
So I was wondering if you guys are thinking about looking at the directive related to handcuffing, because, when I read it, it seems not that firm about a requirement to put somebody on their side to prevent, what happened. And putting that together with, I think the guy's name is Chuck Wexler, who's with the Police Executive Research Forum. He was interviewed in an Oregonian article and talking about how the best practices is not to leave people on their fronts when they're handcuffed, and sort of thought that our directive may be a little bit out of sync with the best practice, and might be something you guys could look at. And your guys are allowed to pull things out of order on directive review, and so that's something that you have the authority to weigh in on. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Debbie. Devontae, I saw you unmuted. Did you have something to add? Oh, no, sorry. Okay. Kip?
Yeah, I mean, on that note, and I got a message in chat also, but yes, we should be looking at the types of holds, the cuffing, and we know the prone position is dangerous to begin with. I think also what is really critical is, and we'll find out through the investigation process, whether or not the engagement directives and policies were followed based on which ones I thought applied and did not really understand why they engaged when they did. And I think all that needs clarification. And one of the things we have talked about in policy and reform before that we do plan on pursuing as a recommendation is clarifying de-escalation and de-engaging. That's not the word I want, but making sure that we have the right people available to engage before any kind of engagement is made, unless there's like a clear and present danger. And if you watch the 3 videos plus, it does, even the conversations the police were having, there was no urgency to this, in my layman's assessment of it. And if the policies are not appropriate or not being followed, those are two different issues. But if they're not appropriate, they need to be reviewed and updated to make sure these things don't happen again. So all of the above.
Yeah.
Disengagement, thank you.
Thank you,
Words are
Kip.
hard.
And we're kind of running out of time, so I'm sorry, Barb and Dr. Allen, but if you could say what your thoughts in the chat or for open public comment and we can interact there, but we have to move on to get to our recommendation. But I think the gist of this is that there's a lot of ideas, definitely looking into directives about holds, and guidelines, and then potentially also guidelines for the rollout of the body worn camera summary situation. Yeah. So if we could get the slides again, please. Thank you. Yeah, and then another update, as I said earlier, the fairness hearing was yesterday. Dory or Liz, someone dropped our PCEP full statement in the chat, which I recommend folks read. It was an interesting one. Lots of interesting things were shared, I thought. That's not very helpful to say, but I guess, yeah, so Kip was there and Jorge was there. I think, Sarah, could you explain the amendment change thing that happened?
Sure. There were
Thank you.
the parties, which is the United States represented by the Department of Justice, DOJ, and the city jointly proposed three uh, somewhat minor amendments to the settlement agreement. One of them conformed a certain paragraph that said you had to return to the budget for budget changes in the monitor's budget. You had to go to the city council. We just changed that to the appropriate member representative of the city because it might be the city administrator, it might be city council. That one, the judge did accept and ordered amended. Another one was to clarify when when sections of the settlement agreement that have been in compliance for 2 years go into self-monitoring. That one was also accepted by the court. The one that got a little bit hung up was the effective termination on the outcome assessments. And as you guys may realize, the monitor both does compliance assessments of whether the city complied with each individual paragraph in the settlement agreement. Those are done every 6 months. But the monitor is also responsible for doing outcome assessments, where they look big picture, are we getting the outcomes we need? And there's a whole list of 26 different kinds of data that can inform these data outcome assessments. And we believe that the parties put forward an amendment to make clear that once a paragraph is terminated, it's no longer subject to any monitoring. And that includes outcome assessments based on its data. So for example, just, the percentage of ESIT calls to get an ESIT officer. That is a paragraph that has been terminated. We now have about 160 enhanced crisis intervention trained officers. The settlement agreement calls for 60. We're doing way more than the settlement requirement calls for, and based on that track record and others in the crisis intervention section, that section was terminated. So the parties thought that, well, it's terminated, you're not going to use that data for outcome assessments. And the court had a long discussion about, well, maybe we should, and is that really the effect? And anyway, it looked like we just hadn't provided enough information about why we thought this was an appropriate amendment, and it wasn't gonna, it was too rushed a discussion to have with the judge at that point. So the parties agreed to withdraw that amendment. So 2 of the 3 amendments to the settlement agreement were ordered yesterday afternoon.
Thank you. Yeah, and then also just to kind of provide a summary, the parties all share, and then the monitor shares their report that we read and the results a little bit, and then the amici share their thoughts. And so a lot of this too, it's not just responding to those amendments, but just like what's been happening in the past 6 months, how's everyone feeling? And so also the mayor and the chief spoke too. And a lot of people brought up the in custody death of Damon Lamar Johnson. And I think like that was really important to bring up. And I think, as we said in our statement, how is this coming to a close when things seem like they're still happening? So that's kind of a general overview. There were some articles written about it that were helpful, so I can drop those in the chat. Jorge, did you want to share something?
No, I just had a question for the city attorney's office. Are the parties going to bring forth like the amendment that wasn't agreed upon by the court later in January?
We haven't had the city attorneys haven't had a chance to discuss that with the U.S. Attorney, the Department of Justice at this point. It's entirely possible because it relates to the outcome assessments, and we do expect that ultimately the monitor will be conducting it. We might file it before January if we do decide jointly to file it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah. So the next hearing is January 6th, 2026. Just so everyone knows. And another big part of the conversation yesterday was about like the independent monitor. There were a lot of questions about the sample sizes they used and how they came to their conclusions. And so that was an interesting discussion as well. And I would say most community members and the Amici brought up like, how are we seeing these cases continue to happen and this use of force continue to happen when we're seeing compliance nearly in full. There's just a big contradiction there. So yeah. I think we can move on unless anyone has any. Oh, one more thing that is a great segue into this recommendation is that a few people brought up the monitoring gap, and the judge seemed really interested in that and wanted the parties to do something about that, which is exactly what we're here to discuss tonight. So it seems like a perfect time to make this recommendation. And so the city, yeah, Sarah?
Before we get to that, Debbie Iona said, if the city and DOJ decide to file the amendment sooner than later, will there be a court hearing to discuss the process that is set in the settlement agreement? If the parties jointly stipulate to an amendment, they agree to file an amendment together. There's no disagreement between the plaintiff and the defendant in that case, in situation. Then they run that by, they consult with the Portland Police Association, the intervener, and the Amici, the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, and the Mental Health Alliance, and then they can file it. If the judge does not set a hearing within 45 days, it can go into the amendment can be approved without further action. But typically I believe the judge has always set a hearing. So that's just that's the process. And I just wanted to answer Debbie's question as everybody had so that everybody could hear.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to.
Not quite.
Oh.
We have one more updatey kind of piece. So yeah, so we're gonna start including this in full committee because it just makes sense. But also, I do want to take this time to talk a little bit about some of our membership and leadership gaps and transitions. As you all have heard from these first two updates, like honestly, really, really big topics to grapple with. And PCCEP, this group of the PCCEP has been gotten really deep in this work. However, we are kind of coming to the end of terms for a couple of people, and we have some existing leadership gaps as well. So I just want to give that preface because I do think we should take a little bit of time to just acknowledge and address it. I don't know if we'll come up with solutions right now. And then also hear updates from the two subcommittees. So I think we should where it makes sense to start, because community engagement, that is very relevant to the gap that I'm describing. Policy and reform has a lot of work going on. And then there's this broader piece about membership, leadership, transition. Anyone have a preference as far as where to start?
I'd like to go first, Story.
Okay, go ahead, Noelle.
Hi, so my name's Noelle Cuthair. Currently I have been sitting as the Community Engagement Subcommittee Co-Chair, and I wanted to share that I've decided to step down from my role as co-chair. I also want to step away from PCEP. You know, this is about prioritizing my well-being in life, and you know, my life has changed since I made the commitment to PCEP, and you know, I can't pour from an empty cup. So I wanted to prioritize myself in this and my well-being and my health. I just wanted to say, though, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to serve my committee, but also the community, and hear their voices. You know, I just wanted to take the time to really speak my truth, and I appreciate you all being here to hear it, and I really hope you understand. Um, these are my limitations, and I just need to prioritize myself. And I really appreciate you guys being here and all the experiences and opportunities you've provided me with.
Thank you, Noelle. Um, we appreciate all the work that you've done, and it's always important to put yourself first. So I'm glad that you're doing that. Carrie? Did she draw? Oh, she's coming back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, well, I stepped up to co-chair the Community Engagement Subcommittee when there wasn't anyone to fill that gap after Ashley left and Noelle was solo, also being a relatively new member. But at the same time, I had expressed you know, the fact that as much as I love PCEP, I will be terming out in September or October this year. And I'm very happy and excited to stay on, and probably will come back as a guest, but I would be exiting PCEP at the end of my 2-year term, which comes up this fall. So and nobody else has yet stepped up to the community engagement subcommittee leadership at this point. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but with Noelle gone and me terming out soon, I'm not really sure what we can do about it.
Yeah, I think so. We just wanted to acknowledge that in this space while we're all here together. But I think that that means for the time being, we have to, you know, I think we can still consider it a subcommittee of PCEP, but it will be inactive until we're able to find leadership. And yeah, so just keeping everyone updated about our schedule and the parts of the committee that are currently active. Go ahead, Jorge.
Thanks, Joy. I was just gonna suggest like a sort of ex officio like facilitator. So not like so that could be like Frida or you, Dory, as kind of like being the facilitator, but still having like members still meet as that, like as a potential option other than having to just kind of pause the whole committee as a whole. That's just a suggestion. I don't know how many people are in community engagement. I want to say like 4, 5. I think after Noelle and Carrie, I'm not quite sure how many are left, but you know, I think it's still worth it to continue it. And if there's an option of someone, you know, staff just facilitating, that would probably be my preference.
The issue is like it's the members who decide the agenda and what to talk about and like the content. So I don't know how that could work without leadership.
I think for that, you could still talk it over with like staff or in like steering committee, and that's probably where like full committee co-chairs can come in into the conversation. But I mean, that's how typically I've seen it from other viewpoints and other advisory bodies. So
Pip?
Yeah, and obviously there's just with a lot of change going on. One of the things that I've discussed, I think the committee going into hibernative state or inactive state isn't the worst thing until we figure out who can pick up the leadership. But there are a lot of things at play right now and a lot of intensity in focus areas. So one thing that we can discuss is using that time to have extra time to work on full committee, subcommittee, or listening sessions. So we can repurpose that time potentially for the community engagement that would have been slotted for that. And it's still a form of community engagement, but it does need to have, like Odelia was saying, intention built around it rather than just for the sake of having it.
Yeah. I also think like maybe when the steering committee met last, we had way more policy committee topics than community engagement topics, and maybe this is the time to level that out a bit and have focus more on policy stuff and figure it out when elections come up again in a few months, because it's not that far away. But yeah, do other members have ideas or thoughts on this?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Jorge.
no, I already talked. You go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I agree that there's some risk in carrying out a subcommittee, and it gives the impression to the community that we are doing the work, and if we don't have capacity to do those things, I just think that that does hold some risk with it, even just in terms of impressions and also just like delivering on commitments. But I like the idea that Kip presented too, and I think like we could kind of gather resources to initiate the subcommittee as needed. So if we have a subcommittee need, we could kind of like hold those meetings, plan the event, have these kind of time limited deliverables, and then instead of having this recurrent agenda setting or things like that. And it seems like, I know the intention was not to, but it seems like there's a lot of overlap anyway with the policy and community engagement again. Like I feel like when I don't go to the other meetings, they don't seem to be functioning autonomously. They're so connected. That's not a bad thing, but I'm just saying there's so much overlap anyway that if there is a lot of activity in one, that then this kind of like ad hoc subcommittee could kind of serve the purpose, kind of like similar to kind of like what was echoed a little bit ago, is just like, yeah, bring it up as needed versus trying to, I think when I talk about the risk of having something continue without the resources to do so, you just eventually fatigue the resources of the folks that are present, and then you see like that further dwindling, versus kind of like if there's an event, people will generally get energized and be able to show up for that. That's kind of my thought.
Yeah, thank you. Jorge?
I'm trying to think. My dog's like barking, but I was just gonna ask Dory or Elizabeth, like, what is the status on that community engagement person? Because like if it's like a month or two away from like having a person, like then yeah, community engagement can kind of like be on pause, because like yeah, it's mainly when we did have that steering committee, it was mainly like policy, and there were some community engagement things that were like seem like it's really that community engagement staff person can really like do on their own, with like PCEP kind of like helping and assisting in like bits. So just kind of curious what the update is with that.
We are deep in the process with HR. Anyone who has dealt with, I'll just say generally speaking, HR, hiring, etc., with any large institution, it does not move very quickly. But it is in process. We get updates regularly. And basically where we're at is the position is being created. Once they create the position, then we can post it, we can recruit, we'll conduct interviews, and then getting someone hired, that all takes some time for sure. So we are probably still several months out from having a person in the role. I do think that your comment, Jorge, speaks a little bit to kind of the confusion around the concept of the community engagement subcommittee in general that we've kind of always had. Because that person, it's not the intention that this staff position will replace the work of members. It will supplement the work of members by doing more outreach and engagement that you all can certainly weigh in on. But it wouldn't be like replacing the work of a subcommittee, which is more content-based. Yeah. So that's response to Jorge. I also want to respond to the idea of kind of having more ad hoc meetings. That is totally something I feel like we could do. The main thing that came out of the steering committee for community engagement was reviewing the PPB community engagement plan. So we could kind of just do like sort of a task force type thing and work on that. And then if more issues come up, we could, see where we get. Yeah, I'm also confident that whatever subcommittees we have in the future, this will be a temporary problem. We have a lot of great applicants. We're working on getting people appointed. But as many of you know, it can take a little while to like settle into this role and feel confident in leading. And so you just kind of are having a lot of terming out all at the same time, and that's tricky. Yeah, so I said a bunch of things just there. Hopefully they were mostly understood. Go ahead, Leslie.
We can't hear you if you're speaking.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I think my headphones went weird. But yeah, I was actually going to propose something that Tia already mentioned in the chat. I mean, currently the policy subcommittee has 2 co-chairs. And I know Tia had been interested in the past of being a co-chair of the community engagement subcommittee. I'm just concerned that because I've always seen kind of the community engagement subcommittee as more of like a information to the public of things. And I think when Tia and Ashley were kind of leading that committee, there was a lot of like bringing in community groups and different voices from the community to present to the broader community. So I don't know if I'm thinking of it correctly, but with this reorg, I almost saw like the policy arm. I mean, we always communicate to the community, but I always saw the policy arm like taking more information from the community, digesting it, and then the community engagement subcommittee being almost like that, that like megaphone of getting what we want the community to learn or things that the community like needs to know or be more aware of. And I would be afraid that by like pausing one subcommittee, we would be more focused on the policy. And so it's almost like a self-propagating thing by focusing more, by like removing the kind of onus to have a community engagement focus potentially. I mean, it's all in like, but by pausing that subcommittee, we are almost like, I don't want us to lose that potentially and then just focus more on policy. I don't think we would, but that's my concern by not having like that dedicated headspace of like, this is the policy subcommittee, this is what we do, this is the community engagement subcommittee, this is what we do. And Tia had presented in the past being interested in taking on that role.
I think your points are absolutely right, Leslie. I will just note that this listening session last week, which again had a very, very good turnout, was planned, it kind of conceived and planned more from the policy and reform subcommittee and the full committee. Community engagement had no role in that event. And that's because really like kind of the outreach and promotion and that kind of stuff, and also of course the organization of the event is all staff work, which will be supported further by our new position later down the road. And then there's content pieces, really, you know, it kind of just depends on who's working on what. But I did just want to highlight that I personally would not be concerned about it stymieing the group's ability to do community engagement. I think the main drawback is just having a smaller space in which to consider content, because there would not be as many meetings.
Right. And I guess in my head, that event last week was very clearly a policy, you know, kind of led event, because we were trying to hear from the community. And it was like, you know, that the communication was that direction type of thing towards a specific topic. But maybe I've just been differentiating it in my head that way because it makes it more clear for me, because otherwise we're all working on very similar things.
Yeah. I'm feeling like it's 4 months ago all over again. I'm so confused.
100%.
Devonte?
Yeah, a lot going on right now. And you know, I think I just I have to be transparent and I have to be frank. You know, I think that the way in which I desire to interact with policing in my community, and the way that I want to, I guess, impact, you know, to make positive impact on my community, I think I think that there's great work being done, but I just kind of see that the way that I desire to impact the work is a bit different than maybe public or you know the majority sentiment of the group. And I do also you know I know Adelia is stepping down from full chair co-chair position, and you know when I had originally ran, I ran with the understanding that you know I would be one of two, not kind of carrying the burden uh, you know, on my own and just, you know, with my full-time position professionally and my student status and then my family. I don't think that that's something that I could facilitate and carry alone at this time. And then also the time that I do have, you know, I just kind of I want to use it a little bit differently as far as the way I interact with policing in my community. So yeah, I do want to announce that I will be stepping down as for my co-chair position at the end of this month, at the end of August. So I guess next month, and from PCEP in general. So
Javante, would you be open to discussing this further offline? I was not trying to open up a can of worms here, but it seems that I have.
Yeah. Oh wait, Devonte, not like a pressuring question, but like if there was another full committee co-chair, would that have would that convince you to stay, or is it like something more than that? And no pressure whatsoever. It's just a like curiosity question.
I think I'd have to give that some serious thought.
Okay.
You know, there was a conversation had offline perhaps. But you know, I think that that's just kind of one of the factors. The other factor is I kind of just see myself, you know, without being too specific, but I just see myself wanting to interact, you know, a little bit differently with policing, than I think the general sentiment. Um, of the group. And so that, without getting too detailed and in the depths, that's kind of just where I'm at with that. But so it's not just that one factor, it's kind of a couple different things. But
Okay.
I'd be open to a conversation offline.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I want to say one thing that I did want to address in this meeting was Odelia leaving soon as she heads to law school, and the fact that we would not want to leave that position open. Just acknowledging that. Go ahead, Conrad.
Thank you. Big shout out to everyone who shared and all the services rendered. I know it feels a little cloudy right now, but I feel like the sun's shining. I feel like things are moving in the right direction. We have a pipeline of people in the works that will be onboarded. There is still so much work to do. And so I think it's okay if we all just take a breath, and we will figure something out. I don't promise that in all my professional experience I have any of the solutions right now, but I do know there's enough intelligent, competent folks in the room that we can definitely figure out some solutions. That might mean, we temporarily put a couple things down in order to pick some other things up. We have a recipe for what has worked with community engagement. I would love to see us continue that work in the meantime, just kind of on tracks, on a rail with regularly scheduled listening sessions. I think that does wonders for outreach, and that can help inform some of our policy recommendations. And if that's all we do, I think we're doing great work in terms of the settlement agreement. So a little bit of sunshine in the rain here in beautiful Portland. That's all I have.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Conrad. Always a voice of reason.
Truly.
Yeah. Well, now that we're talking about it, I'm also leaving. Yeah, so there's that. Noelle?
Hi, I just wanted to take a minute to really reflect on what Devonte said. I wanted to say that I also share his thoughts about the group's sentiment towards police, and I understand where he's coming from. And if he wanted to, talk about it offline, I'd also be open to doing that with him. Even just one-on-one, kind of talking through concerns. But I just wanted to take a moment to really voice that. I think it's important. Even one of the rules in PCEP is we speak our truth.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Dory, I'm gonna hand it to you.
I want to say that as far as, well, first of all, I think it's difficult because people, you all are volunteers and life happens, and some of you are finishing terms, some of you have planned life circumstances, and then for other people this might just not feel like the right thing right now. I think for me, I'm kind of, wrapping up. It's been about what, 7 months of the year so far. And honestly, the last 7 months have been, believe it or not, as freewheeling as this all feels sometimes, some of the most productive months of this group. You all have been passing recommendations at a very quick rate, working on really important policy issues and speaking up in forums where, this community voice absolutely needs to be a part of the process. And this group's been doing that better, in my estimation, in 2025 than I have seen previously. So I just want to emphasize the importance of this work, and that actually, even if it's hard to see the forest through the trees, a lot of really important things are being done. I also want to say I would like to follow up with more of you after this call because I understand the impact that culture has in groups like these, but also if you feel, especially if you're in a leadership position and you feel that you are unable to work on issues that are important to you or kind of yeah. Um Yeah, not sure what else to say. A lot of these new vacancies have been planned and we've been expecting them. And so to hear about some unexpected ones is challenging because I think we were already in a little bit of a challenging spot. Um, but we have figured out worse situations before and we will figure it out. We will move forward and continue all of the important work happening. Yeah. Any final thoughts on this or next steps we should consider? Anybody?
I'm wondering, I don't know if people don't want to elaborate here, but if there's like a shared sentiment about something, it would be great to know what that is. Um, I don't know if this is like the
If
time or the space for that, but yeah.
yeah, I was just gonna say like I think this is like a much bigger conversation that I don't know if we should have on here. Like it's something that probably we should do in a private session, um, which we can do. We just, have to request it. But yeah, I would probably go with more of a private session just because I think I share probably I have an idea of probably what, but I think it's a bigger conversation that I don't think we should more go into it more in this meeting.
Go ahead, Kip.
There we go. Yeah, I want to echo what Jorge just said. I do think we should stick with our current agenda because we do have a published agenda that we do need to get to. But yeah, if there's a need for more internal conversation and level setting and framework setting as to why we're all here and what we want to see get out of it and how we represent the community in making recommendations. Definitely something we should have a conversation about. So all for that, but I do want to do a time check to make sure that everybody who did show up for the published agenda, that we do have time to get to it as well.
Thanks, Kip. And I do want to hear Conrad's comment and then we'll move on.
Yeah, just super fast. I think we all probably feel something along the same sphere from a different perspective. So I'll just call it out publicly. I know a lot of biases in the communities I interact with. And it's very difficult to reconcile that and working within the structure of the settlement agreement and the system. It's very, very challenging, very difficult. I'm still trying to navigate it, and I struggle with that in these meetings. And I think if we go to an executive session in the future, I think it would be nice to call out some of the different backgrounds and biases because I think that's a heavy influence. That's it. And we can move on.
That's a great point. Thank you. Okay. Well, we are considering a recommendation this evening. I'll pass it to the chairs to lead us on that.
Yeah, so I don't even remember which meeting we talked about this, but or how many weeks ago that was, but
Policy and reform in previous meetings as well.
thank you. So yeah, as we know, there was in between the COCL, the previous monitor and then the new independent monitor, there was a gap of 3 months that was not independently monitored, and think we can just go ahead and read the recommendation and then do our thing as we do. Yeah. Does anyone want to read it?
I'll do it.
Oh, amazing.
I
Thank
saw the
you.
look on your face, Adelia. I got
I
you.
was looking at you, Conrad.
I got you. All right, can we pull it up?
Yeah, we're figuring that out. One
Okay.
second.
Sorry. Okay. So our summary of recommendation is that PCEP recommends that Mayor Wilson direct an independent review of the Portland Police Bureau's use of force and broader settlement agreement compliance for the Q2 of 2024. Due to the transition from the COCL to the independent monitor, there was a gap in monitoring for this quarter that must be addressed in accordance to the settlement agreement. Link included there. Body of recommendation. PCEP understands that the City of Portland, the Portland Police Bureau, PPB, and the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, reached a decision that there would be no independent monitoring of the city's compliance with the settlement agreement during Q2 of 2024 due to the transition from the Compliance Officer and Community Liaison, COCL, to the new independent monitor. PCEP is concerned this monitoring gap degrades trust in the broader settlement agreement process, especially given the events that occurred during this period. During Q2 of 2024, Portland experienced some of the highest rates of police use of force in recent history. PPB's open data shows that since tracking began in July 2017, Q2 of 2024 saw the highest recorded use of conducted energy weapons, CWs or tasers, and the highest overall force incidents. Most of these uses of force occurred during the Portland State University protests in May 2024. This is especially concerning because PCEP and community members have not forgotten that the city and PPB fell out of substantial compliance with the settlement as a result of PPB crowd control during the 2020 racial justice protests. The PSU protests marked the most significant crowd control event PPB has seen since the challenges of 2020, underscoring the need to independently evaluate PPB's settlement compliance to assess whether the new remedies are working. Another issue of community concern that fell into this gap was the investigation of the death of Emmanuel Clark, an unarmed Black man who was shot by PPB. As a part of PPB's internal affairs investigation, it was determined that all uses of force against Clark were out of policy. However, the internal affairs process gave Mayor Wheeler and Chief Day the power to reverse this decision. This settlement agreement exists because of the DOJ's investigation of a pattern of officer-involved deaths, including a disproportionate number of Black and brown men. It is of paramount importance that the death of Emmanuel Clark be examined through the lens of settlement agreement compliance. While we recognize there was no intent for this monitoring gap to coincide with unusually high levels of force, the circumstances demand independent assessment. Moreover, this unexamined quarter may undermine the validity of the city's compliance timeline. The settlement agreement requires 1 year of sustained compliance with key paragraphs. If a quarter containing significant use of force incidents remains unexamined by an independent monitor, it will be difficult to credibly claim continuous compliance. PCEP, the Amici, and several community members raised this issue to Judge Simon at the fairness hearing on July 29, 2025. Judge Simon concluded the hearing by affirming that the gap was unsatisfactory and directed the parties to come up with a solution. This recommendation is a means to convey that the solution must be an independent assessment of the gap, and to request Mayor Wilson's support in directing the city to complete the task. PCEP is agreeable to any form of independent monitoring to assess compliance. PPB's own internal assessments do not satisfy this goal. This recommendation reflects persistent community concern about this gap, the first test of PPB's enhanced crowd control tactics, and widespread doubt about the integrity of the settlement agreement process. Before PCEP or the broader community can feel confident that the city and PPB are on the right track as outlined by the settlement agreement parameters and in compliance, we must have a clear understanding of what occurred during this monitoring gap. Failing to review this period leaves a damaging gap in oversight, risks repeating past mistakes, and may result in a serious loss of public trust in the conclusion of the settlement agreement. We thank the mayor for taking these concerns seriously and look forward to the closure that this critical review will provide. As always, we submit this recommendation in the spirit of guiding the city's best path forward towards achieving constitutional policing and building community trust. That concludes sources cited.
Thank you for reading that. So I guess as always, we should look at big picture conceptually. Is this how people are feeling? Are there things we want to change? And then we can narrow into like wording if we need to, but really it's about content for now and that our messages are getting across. So what do people think? Anything people want to start? Yeah, Jorge?
Yeah. So for me, I read it over like 2, 3 times. Everything's like grammar, like line with everything. The only question that I have is with was trying to remember what it was. Oh, how does paragraph 3 and 8 relate to the recommendation in your eyes? Because I see that paragraph 3 was added by Dory, paragraph 8 was added by Odelia. You.
Yeah, I can explain this. So this was brought up yesterday at court and something we talked about a long time ago, but the death of Manny Clark was a specific instance of use of force. I don't know how familiar folks are with the story, but as we said, an investigator found this investigation closed during this quarter, which means if there was a monitor, the monitor would have assessed that investigation, but because there wasn't, we don't know what happened. And essentially, during the investigative process internally, an investigator found that the officer who used force was out of compliance or an out of policy, which is extremely, extremely rare. And essentially, from what I've seen, I don't know if that's like happened much ever before in our history. And so the fact that but given the way the process works, the mayor and the chief still get to make the ultimate decision, and they decided he actually was within policy. And so nothing happened after that. And so I think this is just another reason for this, in my opinion, for this needing to be investigated or monitored independently. Does that clarify?
So is this more uh like hey, these 2 incidents happened during this quarter that wasn't assessed because of this transition. So there may be like other situations that need investigating. Is that kind of the point that we're
I don't.
going for with this? Or like, I'm guessing for me, it's more just like, what is really, in a respectful way, the point of having these two like incidents within this recommendation?
Um,
Like, is it really just like providing like that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of like the point I was saying, like, okay, like just showing like these two things happened within quarter 2 that weren't fully like investigated by the independent monitor, so it should to see what else happened. Like
it's not,
that's, I guess, what I'm trying to get, if
I don't,
that's what you're trying to do.
it's not necessarily to see what else happened, but were these things in compliance with the settlement agreement? Were the protests and the use of force used in compliance with the settlement agreement, and was PPB's investigation in compliance? So it's not necessarily to find if other things happen, which they might have, I don't know, but it's just
Okay.
Does that clear?
Yeah, so to your response to what you said, it's sounding more like this recommendation is more investigating those two matters than more about like doing a full assessment about the whole quarter. That's what it's sounding more like, doing more of a like focusing on these two than like the full quarter in two. And I'm like just thinking about that, like I probably would be more in I don't know if I would be more in favor of either or, but that's kind of the way that I'm like hearing it from you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think in the first paragraph it says like, or the summary, we're requesting them to look into everything. These are just reasons why we think it's super important. Does that?
Yeah, so those
Oh,
two like so for the paragraphs 3 and 8, that's really like reasons to, but it like it's really ultimately to do a
paragraph,
full.
sorry. I
No,
wrote
you're good.
paragraph 8 and Dory wrote paragraph. They're the same. We don't need both.
Oh, okay,
That wasn't, it's the same event.
got it.
It's just the revised version of what Odelia
Awesome.
wrote, so it
Okay,
flows with the rest.
thank you for the clarity. Yeah, so okay. So it's more, so basically overall, it's really like more giving a reason to. Got it.
Carrie?
Yeah, my general feedback is that it's a really important recommendation, and I'm so glad we're doing it. To Jorge's point, and I think you both explained it between the two of you, Odelia and Jorge. I did feel like describing like it's important because we want consistent documentation. We want we want the settlement agreement to be the ruling system. And so listing the reasons more clearly might help. Just to say, okay, we want I guess the reasons that I saw in this recommendation are the two important events happened, the PCC protests and the excessive force resulting in death in custody. And then also I would assume it would affect the compliance. Like if we're looking at whether or not the settlement agreement is in compliance and we're missing a whole quarter of data, then it's not necessarily aligning with our plan to keep things in compliance.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we can be more specific about like the being in compliance and how this could affect that and mentioning that more. Kip?
Yeah, the chat also, there's a side conversation. It is confusing using the wording, but we also need to check what the investigator used and make sure it's in line and make an explanation to it. That's not why I raised my hand initially. To partially answer where Jorge was going and other folks in the meeting might have the question, Judge Simon actually asked about this very thing yesterday as well. Is there a particular reason to look at this time frame? And I did make a comment on the record that it's interesting is not the right word, but it's unfortunate that the gap in monitoring saw a spike and a period of time, spike in use of force in a period of time where it did not keep within the maybe quarter to quarter norms, but actually like over doubled during that time because of the protests. And then learned today about the investigation concluded in that quarter as well. And from a settlement agreement perspective, if it is easy to be more in compliance when you don't have events that push the policies to their limits of experience, right? But the protests echoed 2020. The investigators' findings echoed why we had the settlement agreement in the first place. And that's why I think there's an importance to have this not included, but looked at under the same lens that the independent monitor would have if they had gotten started earlier. So that's kind of the general reasoning behind going after this. Jorge, you kind of picked this in my brain, is that there may be other things that have not been looked at during that time frame that are not related to these two particular things. So that time out of compliance should be included in evaluating against the settlement agreement, because as Mark had stated, their role was only what they had in front of us according to their agreement. And if things went out of norms and possibly compliance during that time, it still ought to be considered. So I'll stop there. I feel like I'm repeating myself. So.
Any other thoughts on things or specific paragraphs that are feeling weird or anything? Oh, I had a comment here. When we're recommending that they assess the gap and they can get an independent monitor, I guess I was wondering too, like obviously we're not going to be like, get this person to do this, but do we want them to confer with us or the Amici or suggest that? What do people think about that? Yeah, Jorge.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of see my comment right there. I was like a yes. I think it's more like, yeah, if it's either, I would prefer like PCCEP, I think it should be part of it, but if not, like definitely, with the other parties involved in the conversation. So yes, from me.
Cool. Leslie?
Yeah, I think this is a really strong recommendation. I just wanted to say that. So great work, all of everyone that worked on it. I did, so like being involved in the process definitely would be ideal. I do question how long that would take. And I have concerns about, even if we get a yes, like delaying the time. So as always, just want to propose adding a time frame, adding something, that kind of gives us a concrete like time frame.
Yeah, definitely. Sarah, did you have something to add?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to I just noticed that you said Judge Simon concluded the hearing by affirming that the gap was unsatisfactory, directed the parties to come up with a solution. Judge Simon very pointedly said that he could not direct the parties to do anything that wasn't in the settlement agreement. That's not his role in overseeing the settlement agreement. So I agree with you entirely that at the end he's like, we've heard a lot about the gap. It seems unsatisfactory. I suggest that the parties get together and discuss, how to resolve these concerns. So I think that's closer. Yes, I mean he, in the way of a federal judge sitting high up on a bench, he suggested that, but and we always take his suggestions very strongly, but he was very clear that he couldn't direct it. So.
Thank you. Leslie?
Oh no, think I tried to lower my hand and I accidentally raised it again.
Oh, okay. Okay. Any other ideas or suggestions? Thoughts? Sarah, is your hand still up? Okay. I had one more thing. I think it's in the beginning. The first paragraph of the body. For me, like where we say this monitoring gap degrades trust in the broader settlement agreement process. I think for me that's definitely a part of it, but there's also concern that like what happened was bad and we need to know that sort of thing. So I feel like for me it's like yes, and I don't know if that makes sense to people or if I'm just reading into it too much. Do people have any thoughts on that? Leslie?
Yeah, I see where you are potentially going, but I think for me, the way I read that is that the fact that we have this period that isn't monitored where we know things happened and that we have this big unknown, it does degrade trust just by existing if we don't investigate it, and figure out what really happened, because the settlement agreement says 1 year of continuous, compliance, and we don't know if that's true or not. So I think it's fine as is. I don't know what other folks feel.
Sarah? Sarah, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that the judge and his communication about this was not as clear as he might have been as well. But the settlement agreement as it stands does not require 1 year of continuous compliance. In fact, for future um, termination, it's by discrete sections, so one chunk at a time. And each section has to be in compliance for a full year, you're right, based on the monitor's reporting. So if he finds it in compliance for two half years in a row, so 1 year total, then it goes into self-monitoring. And then Portland police or other aspects of the city have to report on their performance and have those reports be judged adequate by the monitor. So it's really a 2 year process, but it's piece by piece. And so it's, this whole 1 year of compliance is a little bit, that was the old settlement agreement before it was amended to bring on the monitor and to bring on partial termination by section. So that's just a change that, yeah, he kept saying, the judge kept talking about that, and he kept talking about the benefit of the bargain, which I think is a term that first the Portland Police Association raised. So.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. It's complicated.
Jorge?
I just wanted to ask if there's public comment on this item.
Yeah, if there definitely will be, especially if we're gonna vote on this, then we need to have public comment before that. Does now feel like the time to move into that? Yes.
It doesn't seem like anyone has, like, I don't have anything. I don't think anyone else does. So I'd like to go into it if members are okay with that.
Let's do it.
And yeah, jump into public comment then. And Barbara, I saw that you raised your hand a few seconds ago about this. So if you don't mind putting your hand back up, we'll go to you next. Go ahead, Dr. Allen.
I'm not clear about the distinctions between the contract covenant as it stands now and the way it was before the independent monitor. But I am clear that if there's no political will to actually change the Portland Police Bureau, it probably doesn't matter. What I'm hearing is that PCCEP is pointing rather clearly to this gap being exactly the kind of reason, the gap being holding exactly the kind of reason that the public doesn't feel listened to. Between that gap and the most recent death, there are people saying, well, what have we accomplished? So if there really is no political will, one way or another, we can string this out and it will be another decade before we get this fixed. I do have something else to say, but it's not appropriate for this particular part of the session tonight. I'll wait.
Noted. Thank you, Dr. Allen. Is there any other public community members who'd like to speak to this recommendation? Go ahead, Barb.
Hi, I put what I'm going to say in the chat, but I don't know if you guys want to use the term erodes trust rather than degrades trust. If you pick degrades for a reason, I don't know why, but I think erodes seems to be like more common, but they could mean exactly the same thing and you could love it the way it is. And yeah, I think it's a pretty good, strong recommendation in terms of of describing why you know, coming up with a reason, not just that there was a gap, but there was something. We already know of two things that happened during that gap. But I also am a little concerned that PCCEP doesn't have enough teeth to make anything happen with this. And so I just hope that if that's what comes back from your recommendation, that it doesn't dissuade you guys from still going on, because this is a really big ask. Thank you guys though for doing it.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Hello. Not going to turn my picture on. I've been babysitting all day and I'm still in my pajamas. So anyway, yeah, basically what I just want to support what you all have created, because we have to continue to point out those blind spots that are meant to withhold information that absolutely is necessary for the public to know, for the community to know, for us to just continue to bring forth such things as this, because we just can't give up, right? We can't give up because we think they're not going to listen and they're going to continue to fight us, which they will, but we have to keep fighting back. This is life or death. You know, seriously, this is worth saving lives. And I'm talking about those that are specifically targeted and always have been. And you know, I'm all for pushing even harder. This is not something we can take lightly or word lightly. It has to tell the truth, you know, and I call it the radical truth. And people think, oh, radical, that's a bad word. But no, basically radical is transforming, and it's based on basic decency. And that's what we need. We need in our communities that are over policed and who are continuing to target people and then getting away with some egregious behavior. Just all this abuse of power. We cannot let it ride. And people who haven't experienced it and don't understand, yeah, you need to do a ride along with me. Anyway, just love you guys. Keep up the good work. And it says a road trust. You know, we don't have trust. Too many of us do not have trust. And so I just need to point these things out. You come and talk to the people I know, the people I love, the people I care about, my neighbors, for decades. So anyway, thank you. Thank you, guys.
And thank you, Charlie. Rochelle?
Hi, I think it's great that you're asking for an investigation about this period of time. I'm a little concerned, however, that to just use words like investigation, independent investigation, you may not wind up with anything that you thought you were getting or were asking for. And what I'm referring to is a couple of things. The gap is between what the COCO was doing and what the current independent monitoring group is doing. They are not doing necessarily the same thing. And if you have a third group doing something additional, I'm not sure you'll know what you have with 3 different groups. There also is from time to time a change that Portland police make in what they consider use of force, and whether that occurred in any one of these 3 periods of time, the COCO's period, the independent monitors period, or this gap period, you may be not looking at apples and apples. That's all I need to say. Thanks.
Go ahead, Devontae.
Yeah, I think that that's a very massive point, is that perhaps the ask should be specified to be the independent monitor pick up that period, not a random third party, because that is a concern. We ourselves as a committee have voiced concerned about how certain sections could be found now in compliance that the previous, like the COCO, did not find in compliance. What has changed, and a third party, would have their own way of maybe measuring those points. So yeah, I think that might be something we might consider specifying in here.
I guess I thought the court agreed that the independent monitor couldn't go back and do this. But maybe that's just like an incorrect understanding, but I thought that's the whole reason why or maybe it had to be recommended, but like I thought it couldn't be the COCO or the monitor, and so that's kind of why we were doing this, but
No, it's just that it's not a part of the monitor's active contract. So
Yeah.
they could have a different scope of work, so to speak, for this.
okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Kip.
Yeah, I was going to kind of speak to that, as my understanding is that it was not contracted that they would cover this period. And Devontae, you make a great point. think the challenge is that the metrics being used to evaluate non-compliance, partial or substantial compliance is subjective, which when it was pointed out that other settlement agreements actually had like percentages and more concrete evaluative steps, evaluative steps. It's been a long day, my apologies. It dawned on me that it will be subjective depending on who's doing it. I think we are very much constrained by the agreement that took so long for the city to bang out with the independent monitor and all the different parties. So I'm not sure what the right answer is, other than it does feel like not having some metric to evaluate this time period by included from a independent monitor, whether it's the IM or some other IM, is more problematic. So how we navigate it, or how we talk to the city, or get the Amici involved, or whomever else needs to lean into it, is a better problem to have than not have the problem or not look at it at all.
Leslie, unless Devontae, do you have is your hand just up, or you had another question?
Leslie can go.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so kind of like what Kip just said, that to me is the value. Like right now, we don't know what we don't know. And even though, yeah, we have understood, especially in the last independent monitor assessment, that the metrics are subjective, if having this analysis provides us a level of transparency that we don't currently have. And that to me is of great benefit and a reason to pursue this. To pursue it, even if the current IM does it. So yeah, just have.
I guess I'm wondering, like, because Judge Simon suggested the parties discuss this, yeah, I guess it could be the IM or it could be someone else. I doubt it would be the COCL, right? I don't know. They seem, but I totally forgot what I was gonna say, actually. Never mind.
Go ahead, Jorge.
No, Devontae, you can go.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, Devontae, go. I want to hear your thoughts.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. But I think we lost your signal. There we go. You're back.
Okay, you guys can hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I know it's subjective, and that's kind of, maybe the difficulty in this, but I just think at least having some form of consistency, at least in a process or an evaluation that is subjective, at least makes the data more consistent. And so, yeah, I'm strongly in favor of asking specifically if the independent monitor could be requested to provide within this. So PCCEP is agreeable with any form of independent monitoring to assess compliance. If we could specify and we're requesting then the current independent monitor to do that, I would be in favor of that, just because, I know that we have no information right now, but I don't know that, misinformation is necessarily better than no information. And misinformation is a very strong word to use, but I just mean that, the determinations that they make and, the process they use to get to those determinations might be entirely different than both the COCO and the independent monitor. So it's like, do we really, the results that we get, are they really trustworthy results? Are they consistent? I think that is important. But that's all I have.
Yeah, I was just actually gonna ask if someone from the city could shed more light and more clarification. And I saw Sarah's hand, and I'm like, yay! So, Sarah, if you want to give us your wisdom.
Oh, I don't know how wise it is, and I hope I have not been adding to the confusion. I would just like to say that during this particular quarter, the COCO was still the COCO during that quarter, and the monitor at that point, the enforcer of the agreement, was still DOJ, and they were on the job during this period, and we continued to meet with them. They continued to review policies. They continued to review training as part of their regular work. And they continued to ask questions about some of the PRBs, the police review boards that they watched, and and about the events unfolding on our streets, right? So it's not that there wasn't any kind of monitoring going on. It's just there was never a report written, because as you have, witnessed through your time on PCCEP, the period, the reporting quarter ends, and then there's 45 days and the city provides information, and then another 45 days and they come out with, or even more. It's about 2 months later, they come out with a public report. So the whole process takes a while to get finalized, because you have a month of community input, and during which PCCEP holds a town hall with the COCO. So that whole process, we got the monitor decision made and to the court as quickly as we could once the Section 12 was approved, and we got that going. And the monitor started July 1st, which made good sense to have those reporting periods be the first reporting period, which he's now done the report on. So there is that quarter where we were being monitored, but not any report written up. And I think that's what you're feeling, the lack of any kind of public reporting, especially when these two, the death of Manny Clark and the PSU protests occurred. And I think, reading this, you would very much like to have a third party of some sort, look into those, review those, and kind of give some say. Whether or not they do the full compliance report, did you comply with, paragraph 69? Did you comply with, 72? I think that is less possible to, to do the kind of standard compliance reporting, because that would require any contractor, whether it's COCO or or the monitor or any other third-party contractor, to go back in time, and it would be a challenge. I'm just putting it that way. And to what end? Because the compliance reports, you would have to amend the whole settlement agreement to make that compliance report for that one quarter mean anything, honestly, because as I tried to explain earlier, to whatever success, the current way of moving into self-monitoring requires a full year, 2 subsequent findings by the monitor, the current monitor, Mark Smith and Associates, that the city is in substantial compliance. So that's a year. And we, for many of the paragraphs, we have the first year in this first report. The second half year reporting period just ended at the end of June. And so we'll be, getting them information. They'll be developing that report. So we're not looking backwards to 2024 to judge our ongoing compliance. So I don't know if that time frame helps. It's just very awkward with the lag between, when the reporting period ends and when the actual reports come out. And that's what this quarter fell into.
Hey, Sarah, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So let's say this recommendation gets sent to the mayor, and there's a whole report made and everything. That wouldn't really do much. It would just be kind of a simple report, but nothing with core and about like, in compliance with these paragraphs or anything.
I think it would be very difficult to replicate what report the COCL would have written based on that quarter, a year and a bit later, right?
Yeah.
And because I think also that kind of compliance report based on the current structure of the settlement agreement and the basically the monitoring provisions of that, it would not make a difference in terms of ultimate termination of some, self-monitoring and then termination of any of the sections that are still not, terminated. So, but I think what you all are getting at here and what I heard yesterday is there is a thirst for independent assessment during this quarter, particularly of these specific events that you've named here, to build community trust and to have, the faith that these incidents, that you understand what really went on in these incidents. And that's probably more important reading between the lines than actually a compliance report that says paragraph 72, yes, paragraph 73, no. That's what I understand from this and the conversation today.
So it'll really just kind of state like what, like really what happened, but it wouldn't really do any much enforcement is really from what I'm hearing. So
I would under the current settlement agreement, the version of section 12, the enforcement and the provisions for part self-monitoring and partial termination, it would not change the progress of the city or not progress towards eventual termination of the settlement agreement. I think it would definitely resolve some of the ongoing questions that PCCEP has raised and that some of the other commenters yesterday echoed about what went on during that quarter.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Yeah, based on all of that, Sarah, so thank you for that. And even if it brings more confusion into play, it's good to have all the information to work with. So some of the questions in the chat are aligned with where I was thinking is we understand if the COCL and DOJ were still involved, there were conversations, there were questions, there was just no evaluation or report card on it. Does that mean that there are work products that came out of that time? Because it was, I think our understanding was it was not being monitored, that there was just like an absence, that DOJ and COCL rolled off and there was a gap until IM rolled on. If they were still monitoring, my assumption is that there would be some sort of documentation and or work products involved with that. And is that something that we would have access to? I still think the recommendation is a good recommendation to have as a starting point for the discussion of how do we address this time period where we know things flared up again, because not, again, looking at relative periods of calm, the policies and compliance are easier to say, yeah, everything's great, right? But this was, again, an echo of why the IMLLC came into play, in my humble opinion. So I'm really curious about what documentation, work products, other information might be available.
I was just writing it to the Barb's questions. DOJ and the COCL both were doing some real-time observation, asking us questions about things that were going on in our regular meetings. They attended PRBs. I vaguely remember, my memory is not what it should be, that, we did discuss the events at PSU and the response. And but DOJ does not never produced work product until they produced a final report, and they did those reports over their time as the enforcer monitor. So that they did not do any further written work product. They have quite a process themselves for doing that on their time frame. So that did not happen for that quarter, and the COCL did not do that. The city did not produce, at the end of the quarter, we have 45 days to produce a status report on how our compliance with each and documentation of compliance with each paragraph. That did not happen for that quarter. So there is a gap in the work product in the reporting, the written reports. So that's what you're seeing.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Devontae? Do you mind?
Go for it.
Thanks. So we used to have 2 reports going back in the day. Back when we started this, we'd get one from the COCL quarterly and one from the DOJ annually. So you're saying that the DOJ, since they're not the monitor anymore, isn't writing reports, and so we're just getting one report and it's from the monitor? Or are we supposed to be getting 2 reports, one from the monitor and one from the city?
No.
Okay.
Time immemorial, and Mary Claire has been the point person and done an astounding job of this. Every 45 days after every reporting period ends, the city must produce kind of both, and these are posted online, must produce a status report, and it has a little blurb about what's happened in the last quarter for most of them, on each paragraph. And so that has, those are all posted online. They're endless documents. And then to back up those, self-assessments, the status reports by the city to the COCL and now to the monitor, the city produces a bunch of documentation, and all sorts of supporting documents that evidence its compliance. And so those are all produced to the COCL and now the monitor 45 days after the reporting period is over. The monitor then has a period of time, 45 days, to get a draft report to the parties for our review, and often kind of, gap filling and technical corrections and that kind of thing. And then the monitor puts out the public draft, takes public comments for a month, has town hall, and then considers those comments and then gets out a report. So the whole thing takes 4.5 months. So, it's one of those, like, you feel like you're on the hamster wheel because you're, talking about the report for quarter 1, you're already in quarter 3, and you're trying to, the city's trying to get the status report in for quarter 2, and it's all happening at once. Now with the 6-month reporting, it's a little bit easier. Then the DOJ periodically, it wasn't always every year, they did 7 of these, in their compliance reports. They used the information from the COCL, and then they also requested additional information based on things that they had observed or watched, or things they wanted to dig deeper in. They didn't always accept the same analysis that the COCL did. You'll see there are differences between the COCL's reports and what DOJ's conclusions were. And they would come out with their own reports. And those are the ones that we had to be in full compliance with every single paragraph for a full year before we get into, get the agreement terminated. So that's where some of the 1 year of full compliance, that's where that mindset came from. DOJ was more than happy to stop writing reports. I don't think I'm, it's unusual for them to be both in the role of monitor and plaintiff. And they are much more accustomed to working with an independent monitor. And so when we moved to that model, they stopped writing reports, and the COCL didn't have to write reports. You just have one person writing reports. So it was a big shift. And in the transition, there was a quarter that never got even a draft report. So hope that's right. It is complicated, and I'm sorry about that.
Can I just summarize by saying, I think, so yes, the COCO is around, but like the formal process of determining compliance or not happens in the reports. And that is what is being identified here.
Yep.
Because that did not happen. I think that's the TLDR. Because I'm seeing still confusion happening in the chat. So I think that hopefully sums it up.
Yep. Right. There was no written report done on this quarter by either the COCO or DOJ.
Go ahead, Devontae.
So I guess like reeling things back in, I'm curious to know if now that we are aware that even if we got a third party to take a look at that quarter, that it wouldn't impact the city's current compliance or PPP's current compliance or progress in compliance. In that the only thing that I'm not going to say the only thing and minimize the importance of it, but what we would be getting is transparency for the community to, I guess, have an idea, even though it won't be as thorough as one of the other compliance reports. We would have some sort of information about what occurred, would be all that we would get. But public sentiment, at least the community feedback that we've been getting, is that we want that looked at because it is believed strongly that there is not compliance for that quarter. I guess it almost to me feels like a mute point, because if community is requesting that this be done because they believe, right, that it's not in compliance, and that all we would get was, you're right, and then nothing happens with that, then I guess I'm wondering if that changes the perspectives of any of the other committee members.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kip.
Yeah, it doesn't for me, Devonte, and the reason being is compliance with the settlement agreement is only one aspect of what we're trying to navigate, right? So understanding if something looked like it was out of compliance or was out of compliance, and whether or not the city can go ahead and get somebody to do a metric on it, or if we can get a report on it and it does seem things are out of compliance, then it's our job to look at that and say, regardless of what the IM saw during the time that they were contractually obligated to monitor, there's still work to be done, especially 4 years after the summer of 2020, where there's still lawsuits that are not settled. There's still reports that haven't been delivered. There's still a lot of work to be done from that summer. So it's still very possible that whatever comes from this will inform what we need to be focused on. And again, I think other than PSR, we got the most amount of feedback from the IM reporting and town hall and the questions about the missing time period than I think anything else until last Wednesday. So
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, very much like, many of our members, there was a lot of maybe insight that was provided during this meeting. And so that's why I wanted to know if that changed anyone's perspectives, because that may or may not have changed perspectives of the individuals asking us to put this forth. So I appreciate that, Kip.
Odelia.
Yeah, I was just kind of answer your question, Devonte, that I think regardless of the settlement agreement, we're not just doing this for compliance or non-compliance. We're doing this for transparency and community and to know what happened. And so I think that like regardless of its impact or non-impact, it's still a worthwhile thing to do, and maybe the city will be prompted to do something outside of the settlement agreement. If there are certain results, like we don't know what would come of it, so we can't say what could come after that. But I think, like, for me, I see all of this as worthwhile if it will bring more transparency. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thanks, Odelia. I mean, I think that even if we look at like the graphs that are at the bottom of the document, I mean, we know what happened. I think community also feels that way, which is why it's been so heavily asked, but we can see the spike there. So other than what we already know, right? That's, I guess, why I'm posing the question, because we have the data right there.
Viva?
I think this current conversation is really maybe highlights kind of maybe what we need to do with the recommendation. If we're as a group having this much confusion around our intent and what we hope to accomplish, I don't know that that's coming through in the document either, and so this isn't promoting that we do the recommendation or not, but more just what do we want this to do, and does that come through in the document? And I don't know that it does yet. I don't have specific things that I can say like this section it need to change and this section it need to change, but I do think it's reflective of why we're having this discussion now. I don't know that clarity is present. Maybe it is for other folks, but I think, maybe I'm just over here having the hard time with it. Like, so, because that's what I was trying to think about too, is like that point about the third party and the compliance and all that. Like, I think we're entertaining some of that conversation and confusion because of the document potentially.
I'd like to hear what Mary Claire has to say, as it might clear some more confusion.
Actually, I'm going to ask you to clear up some confusion for me. Can you, is the intent of this just to look at the force that was used in that? I mean, that seems to be the focus, but I'm not clear whether your request is to ask for the entire settlement agreement to be assessed for the second quarter, or just the areas related to the use of force. So that'd be my first question to you. And then depending upon what your response is, then I'd like to comment.
I can clarify.
I direct Odelia for that.
It would be for everything that the settlement agreement says. So it would include use of force, but also like investigations, everything else.
Okay, well, let me tell you, I mean, you're obviously free to make whatever recommendation, but I will tell you that is going to be more problematic than just focusing on the force, because the Bureau was not required, the city was not required to make reports. Like Sarah explained to you, my job is to put together a report. It was every quarter, and it's now every 6 months. That wasn't required. And so the information that somebody needs to, that you're asking for somebody to look at isn't there. And I'm not sure we can, in some areas, maybe we could reconstruct, but in other areas we wouldn't. Whereas with the force, if your concern is with the spike, I see the draft, I understand, I've looked at it, I told you we'd provide you with those use of force. And as I've said before, if there's concern with the behaviors, you can also talk to IPR about any complaints that were made by the public for the PSU protests or what have you. But and so we could give you all the, or whoever the independent person is that you seek, all the force reports and all the information we have, because we still did that, force report, as Sarah said, even though there's no report by DOJ or COCL, some of the things we always do that we put up on the website, we continued to do. So there is a report on the website for the second, a force report for Q2 of 2024. And, there would be information available about, officer involved shootings or what have you. But in terms of being able to have somebody who didn't monitor us during the time, So didn't observe anything. I don't know how you would expect them to judge the training that was done when they didn't observe it, things like that. It's just much more problematic that you're looking for somebody to go back when they weren't privy to any of this, to then make an assessment of our compliance on all the paragraphs in the settlement agreement. So I just wanted, bring that to your attention so you have, that understanding that this would not be, necessarily a task, an easy task for sure. And I'm not sure that, we'd have the ability to do it, nor would, necessarily a person be able to come in, a stranger to this, who isn't the COCL or isn't the monitor, and look at the information that we had and make that determination on all the paragraphs. Because part of monitoring is to come and observe. They come to trainings, they come to meetings, as you well know, we used to
Mary
come to
Claire?
all of those meetings. Yeah.
Yeah, so what you're saying is like if this were to happen and it was through like a third party that's not any of the parties involved, that it would be extremely hard and possibly a waste of resources unless it was someone that actually knows like the independent monitor or the COCL or something like that, then it would be more possible to do or to find like to do all that.
Well, it'd be certainly easier for somebody who's already evaluated use of force and, our OISs and stuff like that to do that.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you asked, as I said, I have to really think about whether it's even possible to reproduce or try to now do the report I would have done a year and a half ago, basically, because it would have been the end of the second quarter. So a little more than a year ago. Because at the time you get the information and the documentation for what happened in that quarter period. And we've moved on. We've had, all this time
Okay.
since. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary Claire.
Yeah.
Dory?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge we are not going to get to a place of voting on this tonight, as is obvious. There are a lot of questions that have come up that we should resolve and decide if we want to take this up at a later time, which is totally possible. I was just remembering the subcommittee where this was addressed, or where we first reviewed this, and there were almost no questions. So it's good to get this out now. But yeah, it's just kind of a lot of things I think that weren't anticipated in the document. So yeah, just wanted to speak that.
I'd like if we could table this and bring it back to policy and
Yes.
possibly have Sarah and possibly Mary Claire and other parties involved to kind of help with more. Because I think there's many other questions that we
I
have.
could support in fact finding. In the meantime, it would be better to probably do that outside of a public meeting so we can come in with from a more informed perspective. And so that is work that I can support. Go ahead, Odelia.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say, yeah, I think like I'm tired. This has been quite the meeting. And so I think we should wrap up, but regardless of like PPP always does their reports and they always have, and the monitor assesses their reporting. So it doesn't matter if they did it, right? And I think that's an important thing to remember. And like I'm just gonna voice this like a wee bit of frustration just because I feel like we've been talking about this for a long time and this is like a general point, but like I've been trying very hard to communicate with PCCEP like, hey, can we look at this in advance so we can talk through things? Can people make comments and edits? And like we had this similar conversation at the last meeting and like I guess I'm leaving so it doesn't even really matter, but like we need to find a way to be better about being proactive, I think, and because it's just like personally frustrating for me. That's all I'll say. Yeah.
Go ahead, Conrad, sorry.
Okay, I'll keep it very short. Just from being on the Policy and Reform Subcommittee, what I will say while everyone's here, just so there's no illusions, I'm just speaking on behalf of myself, not the subcommittee, but I fully anticipated there would be a lot of hiccups. I fully anticipate that the ask is not within scope or budget. But let's talk about what this is about. This is about acknowledging moral hazard. When we are unwilling to acknowledge and publicly state that we don't know what we don't know, to steal a line from one of my counterparts earlier. And that needs to be documented. And if this, whatever it looks like moving forward, gets someone from the city to acknowledge we don't know, even though there are apparently all these recorded conversations, we don't have insight into that. That is our frustration. I don't mean that personally for any of the city folks here. Appreciate having you. If we can at least get to that point, I think that is imperative. We are going to lose agency with a lot of our community members if we can't at least get a public acknowledgement. So that's where I am in my corner. Thank you.
All right. Let's go ahead and address some of the hands that are up. Go ahead, Mark. Mark, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. We still cannot hear you, Mark, if you are speaking.
What about now? Can you hear me
Yes,
now?
we can hear you.
Thank you. Mark Porras, he, him pronouns, Portland Cop Watch. Just want to say that I fully support you all recommending as in-depth of a review as you can get of 2024 Q2. And just remind you there, well, I don't know, folks may not know, there are multiple tort claims filed for PPB response during the protests at PSU in May of 2024. And also that happened to be right before the rapid response team was reformed. So I believe those were probably some of the newly coming in rapid response team members were probably mobile field forces or whatever it is. But I think you want to have a good understanding of that last period of large protest activity and how that was handled by PPB. Anyway, that's what I'd like to see.
Devontae.
I'll forfeit my place in line and allow others to speak that haven't spoken.
Okay, thank you, Devontae. Pastor Wisner.
Thank you. I apologize for being late and off screen. And I think, as always, my words of encouragement from what I've been listening on the areas of where you have formed a thought to be able to at least have some acknowledgement, but more so understanding the depths of what you're doing in your work. Well, congratulations. You are graduating to the hardcore of the work. This is, as you heard yesterday, three decades almost and face of work. There is no wrong questions, and there's no real clear understanding on a lot of things that you take off at the beginning of this bite of what we're doing or you doing. But not to be weary, please, because again, just your presence and the things that you're trying to get understanding in. I would say to Marco also, those answers, I know CopWatch has a lot of answers already there. What we would say, I would say, is again, I think I heard the chair say, building your own homework, doing your dig-ins and getting the right language, knowing the what you're asking for. And I want to thank this Sarah and Mary Beth for such an outstanding job that I've heard in their explanation of giving clarity and how it worked. Because again, I did look at 2 reports before. It was always the city as well as the DOJ's, and then we looked at the COCO with Rosenbaum and them. So it was always enough information, but you have to do a lot of digging in to do this. But please be encouraged. If I say no more than that, because it's just what you're looking and hoping to be able to bring to the community. And more so than anything, your involvement speaks well. Your participation is here well as a team. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Pastor Weisner. Go ahead, Dr. Allen.
Much earlier tonight, Debbie mentioned the Police Executive Research Forum. I read about them last week. They did the kind of research based on police use of putting those people they are arresting face down and handcuffing them behind their back. They did that research. 50 years before this, it was well known in the medical community that that was a dangerous position. I learned it in nursing school. It's not exactly high-level research if I learned it in nursing school. Unless police are trained as paramedics, I don't think they should have the right to do something so dangerous. But I don't think that's what matters to police. I learned a new word this week. It's called de-alignment. And that has to do with just who do the police consider an authority. And my question here is, do police officers consider the Police Executive Research Forum an authority? Does it matter to them what this forum says? I would really like to know who the police do consider an authority. I don't think we're going to get anywhere till we find out who they think their authorities are. Not about the mayor, but about the people who tell the truth about the way the body works, or about what good policing is, or about political philosophy. I'm sure police have political philosophy wound into all of this. If they didn't, we wouldn't be talking about police being oppressive to people of color. So there's political philosophy built into that. The question is, in my mind, who do they consider an authority?
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Barbara?
Hi, Barbara Bashinsky. I would like to go back to several people in PCEP feeling, I think they feel like their viewpoint is not included or valued. And I think it's important, I know you want to discuss it amongst yourselves, but I think it's important that it be made public, the general aims of PCEP and how some people are not included, because I think that these different perspectives also show up in the communities. And so it's important for transparency and for, so that people, so I don't know how to always include all the different perspectives, but somehow they need to at least be known. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so it seems like there's not going to be a vote tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to Odelia or Dory to finish out the meeting.
Yeah. I think we're going to consider that our open public comment period, as I put in the chat. So I'll hand it to the chairs to close the meeting.
Yeah, so what's next? On Wednesday, the 6th, there's going to be a policy and reform subcommittee meeting. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming and being here. Definitely had some good conversations. I don't know if anyone else, Devontae, do you want to close anything else out?
Yeah, I appreciate everyone attending the meeting today. There was a lot of information provided, lots of updates, lots to think about. And yeah, I just am thankful everyone decided to come and participate in the meeting today.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.